I want to take a moment to say thank you to everyone for being here today. I'm Lori Cristofero, Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum and Instruction at Lockport Township High School, and I'll have our staff who are participating in this webinar introduce themselves in a few minutes. I want to thank the parents and students who may be watching, and for those of you who participated in the thought exchange in conjunction with this town hall meeting. Both the thought exchange and questions you may pose in the chat will help us create a frequently asked question document to place on our website. We will not be able to address all of your questions tonight, but I did want to address one question that came up in the thought exchange. And that question was, why isn't LTHS live streaming? I'm going to take you back to the beginning. When we initially made that decision over the summer, it was to support the safety measures that were needed to support teachers and students safely engaging in person in the classroom. This was a new paradigm for both of them, and it required the teacher's attention be squarely focused on those who were right in front of him or her, as well as being attentive to the space between students. Also, we knew that we wanted to ensure the dynamic interplay that occurs in relationship building in a common space. We wanted to see teachers and students grow those relationships, because when teachers know their students better, they can help meet the needs of their students better. And conversely, so many of our students rely on these relationships with teachers to help motivate them when they're learning, and to be vulnerable when they're struggling to ask for help from somebody they trust and know. Finally, we knew our decision had research behind it about what was considered best practice, known at the time, in remote learning. We'll talk about some of these best practice traits a little bit further. Dr. Jen Webre will mention those. Furthermore, as time went on and we stayed in touch with our networks and other districts, we continue to keep in contact with them to hear how are things going in your district with live streaming. And we heard stories about low student engagement, especially from the students who were home viewing. And then we really heard that coming in person really dropped off. And so then even more engagement declined even further. We know that student performance was not as successful, and we feel because our students stayed engaged, we saw a very high passing rate, especially as it compared to other districts in the area. So that's a little background on why we are not live streaming. Today, we wanted to meet with you to show you the value of our model, where students are having lessons 5 days a week, although it may not look the same as in the traditional model. You know, we have 2 days of in-person in our hybrid model. We have 2 days of at-home learning and 1 day of live online synchronous engagement between teachers and students. These teachers today will show you how the in-person experience connects with the at-home experience and the Wednesdays, and all of these are necessary for students to fully learn the concepts and skills required for their success. I'm going to go around the room quickly and ask each participant, in order that they're presenting today, to say their name and their role at LTHS. I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Jen Webre.
Good morning. I'm Jennifer Webre. I'm the Assistant Principal for Curriculum and Instruction at the East Campus.
Hi, I'm Kara Coyle, and I teach Junior American Literature and Senior Contemporary Literature.
Hi all, I'm Gail Horsiak, and I teach Junior American Literature also, and AP English Language and Composition.
Good morning, I am Angie Pompilio. I teach Junior American Literature as well, and then Senior Contemporary Literature.
Good morning, I'm Tammy Gallagher. I'm a member of the English department, and I teach Senior Contemporary Literature.
Good morning, I am Bridget Laporte. I teach science at East Campus, anatomy and physiology to seniors, and to sophomores, I co-teach with Monica Case, integrated science.
Good morning, my name is Kayla Marbach. I'm a Spanish 2 and Spanish 3 teacher at East Campus.
Good morning, I'm Beth Zacco, and I'm a school counselor at Central Campus.
Hi, good morning, I'm Kathy Fields, and I'm a counselor over at East Campus.
Thanks to all our educators for giving up some time on their Saturday morning to be here. They've got some outstanding information to share with you today. One thing I just wanted to let our audience know is that we're all at different locations, so there's really no easy way to advance the slides except for our presenters to say slide. So please forgive us for that. Oops.
So whether students are learning at home in a full remote schedule or in our hybrid schedule, there are some simple things that students can do and you can support them in doing to help them be successful at home. Slide. Let's go one more. So the initial thing that students can do is to treat every school day as if they were coming to school. Treat it like a regular school day. So wake up at a regular scheduled time every day, eat breakfast, get dressed, maybe work out in the morning if that's part of your schedule, but have a routine that you follow as a regular part of your day. Follow your class schedule also for your work. It helps if, for example, English is your first period class, you work on English first thing that day. It's easier to keep up with things and not set certain classes aside by following that same class schedule. And plan times for breaks and for lunch. It's important for everybody that students and teachers take a step away over the course of the day, even if it's just 5 minutes, as if we were having a passing period to move from one class to another. For students at home, it's important to have a place for school. That helps them stay organized, but it also gives them the opportunity to step away from that spot for those break times. Step away from technology, step away at the end of the day. School is very important, but taking a break and relaxing your mind is also very important. At school, there's a lot of organization just built into the structure, moving from one period to another, having materials in the classroom, having a locker to keep things in. So everything students can do to kind of keep that same kind of structure at home is also helpful. So make sure your Chromebook is charged or you have a place to easily plug it in while you're working. Have paper, Post-it notes, a pen or pencil ready so you can take notes or jot things down over the course of the day. It's important for students to organize their technology also. Google Classroom and Infinite Campus portals, which I'll talk about in just a minute, are important tools that teachers use to communicate with students. So students should start the day by checking their Google Classroom, logging into their Infinite Campus portal, and also checking their email. There's a lot of communication that comes from the district and from teachers that students need to be aware of, and the best way to make sure they get that is to check email. Students also need to remember just to organize their thoughts. Take a few minutes before the day starts and make a plan for the day. If you know you're going to have questions for your teacher, you can ask those questions through email or connect with your teacher at the end of the day, but make a note of those questions so you don't forget them. Slide. There are two key tools that LTHS uses in working with students. One is a Google Classroom, which is basically a classroom very similar to what they come into at the building, but it's in a virtual world. So it's where they meet with teachers, it's where they can see other students, it's where teachers can share materials, and where students can submit their work. Just as you don't necessarily come into the building with your students every day, parents don't log into the Google Classroom, but they do have a parent portal in Infinite Campus. And that's where you're able to double check your student's schedule, keep an eye on grades, and also monitor your students' attendance. So those are two important tools that you can use to help support your students' work and just to be aware of. I'm going to turn it over to Team English now, and they're going to fill you in on some of the things, slide, Ms. Cristofero, I'm sorry, some of the things that they use to communicate with students. And you're going to see these across the board with a lot of different classes. When we communicate with students in learning, we talk about learning targets. So we have students use I can statements to guide their learning. We want to have interactive activities, which the teachers are going to tell you about. We provide opportunities to check for understanding. And you should know that these at-home learning activities that students are doing are going to take approximately 30 minutes, maybe a little bit more, maybe a little bit less, depending on the actual activity. So Ms. Coyle, you're on.
Thanks, Dr. Webre. So when we realized that we were going to be back in a very different setting for school this year, we quickly realized that we were not going to be able to approach our planning the way we normally would, where we have a 5-day schedule, and we had to adapt to really a 2-lesson per week model, and then we have this extra half day. So we refer to it as like the 2.5 lesson model that we use now. And the district provided us with this sample hybrid template. And it shows how the classroom experience and the at-home learning experience are connected to the overarching learning objective for the week. So in this sample one, our overall objective would be the components of the rhetorical situation. So if we were introducing our students to rhetoric and we were just starting to get into that unit, this would be how we would approach our week. When we look at our planning, we determine what skills we need to focus on, and we build our at-home learning days around those skills so that the at-home learning experience actually supplements the in-person learning regardless of the sequence. So it really doesn't matter what day your student is in person. Your child might be in person on a Monday or Tuesday, but they're not missing any key instruction in order to do their work, their at-home assignments. Our learning targets drive our in-person lessons and our at-home learning assignments. We work to develop really tight lesson plans so that all of these days complement each other. So when we have students working at home on a Monday or a Tuesday, when we all come back together on that Wednesday remote day, we really link everything back together for what was done both in person in school and on those at-home learning day, whether it was Monday or Tuesday. So this district template allows teachers to develop thoughtful and sequential plans, but the information that the students need is much simpler. It's just the information that's going to keep them organized. So they know, what am I supposed to be doing on these at-home days? What can I anticipate when I'm in person? On my in-person days, what are the actual assignments that I'm supposed to be working on? Students want and need to see the topics and the tasks, so we create much simpler calendars to share with our classes. So the next 2 slides are sample calendars that teachers use. Slide, Ms. Cristofero, thank you. So this is a sample of what one of my calendars would look like. My goal is to keep it as clean and straightforward as possible. I try not to overload the students. This is, a pretty, simple week for them. I don't include a lot of hyperlinks on mine. I want students to go to Google Classroom, where I like to assign their independent work to them independently. So each student receives a copy, much like they would if they were in the real classroom, and you would just, hand out the assignments to the students. There is another version, if you go to the next one. Thank you. So this is Mrs. Wersiak's calendar that she uses, and she has a monthly format. So every week when we sit down to weekly planning, she will add on to the week for the students. And Mrs. Wersiak likes to add the hyperlinks, the hyperdocs on hers, so students can very easily click, and then they are brought to that document that they need. She does also post in Google Classroom. A lot of teachers, have this method where they will post those links right to the calendar so the students can easily click and also assign it in the Google Classroom for them. The hyperlinks that we're referring to are the blue, they're in blue font, and they're underlined, and so students just hover over and click and they're taken exactly where they need to be. So Mrs. Wersiak, speaking of Ms. Wersiak, is gonna pick up from there and talk a little bit more about Google Classroom.
Thanks, Ms. Coyle. Yeah, so after Mrs. Pompilio and I talk a little bit about Google Classroom, our fabulous colleagues are going to give some examples of the way that they have designed the at-home lessons, and just give you an example of the types of things your students might be engaging in at home for those lessons. And so before they do that, we just quickly wanted to reiterate some of the things that Dr. Webray said about Google Classroom, because regardless of where students are sent for their at-home learning, if they're sent to, maybe watch a video, I make videos of myself for my students when they're at home because I want to talk to them even if I don't see them. Or I may send them to watch a video. I might send them to submit an assignment in Turnitin.com, which we use really often in the English department. But we just wanted to reiterate that all of that information will be housed for the student in Google Classroom. So even if they are sent somewhere else, like you'll see in these sample at-home lessons coming up, they would find all of that information in Google Classroom. That's where, like Dr. Webray said, you want your students to start every day, every class, that's where they will go. To find their link for the Google Meet, of course, contact information for the teacher, but then, all of their class calendars, regardless of what the format is, like Ms. Coyle showed, her calendar is on Google Classroom, my calendar is on Google Classroom, even though it looks different. Some teachers may actually use the calendar feature in Google Classroom. And whatever the teacher has decided, that stays consistent. So even though a student will have to navigate for different classes, the teacher chooses what's going to be best based on how much information needs to be conveyed, what type of information needs to be conveyed in the course itself. And then so that would remain consistent then throughout the year for that course. Like Ms. Coyle said, you can find assignment details and due dates on Google Classroom. Even if you are then leaving Google Classroom to complete the assignment or even submit the assignment, that's where the information will be. And then again, materials and resources. Google Classroom has the materials and resources that we use for every lesson, like Ms. Coyle said, as if we were just handing it out in class, we upload it to Google Classroom. But then also Google Classroom has a lot of supplemental materials. Like if there are just resources I think a student might want to access as a review for a previous year perhaps, or some additional activities to help them that aren't assigned, there are a lot of optional materials on Google Classroom as well for students who might want to review. And then again, some courses may have students submit assignments on Google Classroom, grade assignments on Google Classroom. Even if that's true though, even if teachers do grade on Google Classroom, their grade will still end up in Infinite Campus. So like Dr. Webray said, the grades will always be in Infinite Campus regardless of where the feedback comes for the students. Mrs. Pompilio will talk about a discussion forum that sometimes we might use on Google Classroom, and so will Mrs. Gallagher. And students may take quizzes or watch videos on the Google Classroom. If I haven't said Google Classroom enough, the key message here is that's where all of the students will find their information before they then go out on their own to wherever they need to complete their at-home assignment. Mrs. Pompilio, you're up.
Thank you. I wanted to show you a few features of Google Classroom. So if you were looking on your student's classroom, you would see some of these things. The first thing that you would arrive on is called the stream. So this is an image of what the stream would look like for a class. Once you click into one of the class boxes, this is what you would see. If you're looking around at the top, you can see the course name, and then right under the course name would be the link where your student would connect with the teacher. That's where they would go. That's the link that they would use for their class period, or really anytime if they were going to meet with their teacher, that is possible if it was set up. As you're looking down, you can see on the left-hand side, it says upcoming. When teachers put assignments into Google Classroom, which I'll show you in a second, in the classwork tab, if you put it in as an assignment, there are due dates. And if you put in due dates, it comes up on the upcoming for their students. So they will see that every time that they go into their class. They'll know exactly what's due today, as it says, or due on Thursday. So it's a great tool to keep students organized and on task. And each class will then show that. Also on the stream, you can see the little boxes. They can see when I've uploaded something, and they can also see if I make an announcement. So I could write a short little message to them, and then they would be able to see that when they click on my classroom tab. Next slide, please. The next tab over is called the classwork tab, and this is really where everything is located that the student would need, whether they're in hybrid and they're in school in person or they're at home. This is where they're going to locate all of the materials and all of the assignments that a student would need. So when you open the classwork tab, teachers organize in different ways. So I have two types of organization on here. On the left-hand side, it's organized by unit. So as you add a unit, that unit you're currently in is at the top. And then you would add more assignments to those units. So you can see unit 1, and then there's assignments, and you can see unit 2 and the few assignments that are there at that time. And again, there's the date when it was posted or when it is due is all located right there on the assignment. On the right-hand side, it is organized by week. Another just organization tool to keep students on task and kind of make it clear to them what they need to be doing. So materials for like January 6th through the 15th. So if they're looking at the calendar and for those days in that week, they'll know that's exactly where they need to go. And that is all of the assignments or quizzes or forms that they will need for those dates. Okay, I'm gonna pass it on now to Mrs. Gallagher.
Hello, Mrs. Pompilio and Mrs. Wierciak have given you such a great overview of how Google Classroom is wonderful in both delivering different kinds of lessons and technology and features, and also how it is an organized way to deliver those types of things. And what I wanted to do was kind of show you what an at-home assignment might look like. So of course, we have a very specified number of in-class minutes that we think about very carefully how to use those minutes most effectively for our students. But the at-home learning is very much given a lot of attention to ensure that those assignments are also very meaningful. So that time at home is really important, and the success of the lessons depend upon the students completing that at-home assignment. So on your screen right now, you can see two things. One is a set of directions for an at-home assignment. And as you can see, even if you cannot read the actual print, you can see that it's very detailed. It tells the student exactly what it is they need to do. It gives some guidance. It's very specific. In this case, the instructions talk about using a feature of Google Classroom called Jamboard. And Jamboard is really great, and it can be used in many disciplines, not just English. It allows for basically students to do several things. You can see on the right-hand side, it's really like a bulletin board or a virtual whiteboard. Students can respond to any number of things. They could respond to images, pictures, they can post things, they can answer questions that have been posed by the teacher, and they do so in some creative ways. You can see that it looks like a bunch of Post-its. Students can write their responses and post directly to the Jamboard, and it gives them an opportunity to respond, practice, again, depending on the discipline, whatever the teacher has planned for them to work on. In this case, you can see a photograph and some questions. We had students actually post pictures, and they also had the ability to respond to each other. So even though this at-home lesson is outside the classroom, it's not in the virtual teaching room, students can still have interaction with these at-home lessons. The teacher can give a direction like, I want everyone to pose a response in one color sticky note, and then I want you to answer one of your peers in another color sticky note. So then, there's a little bit of interaction there, which is great. It also can afford choice for students at home. Maybe the student would have an opportunity to choose a question to answer or choose something specific to respond to. So there are a lot of virtues of some of these types of assignments. Another virtue of these at-home lessons is that students can kind of pace themselves. As I mentioned, we allot a specific number of minutes in our lessons for we want to pack in as much as possible. We want to make it very meaningful, but maybe students want to take a little extra time with a task or an example of practice. Maybe they want to go back and look at it. Students have the ability to do that. They also really, really clearly, these lessons clearly connect to the overall skill and content that's being taught. So we want to emphasize the nature of these as being very essential to the learning. It's not things that are just posted and forgotten about. On the calendar that Ms. Coyle referenced, she mentioned and pointed to the Wednesday lessons where we have our virtual check-ins, and I use that language sometime with my students. So if we have an at-home lesson and an in-class lesson, when we come back on that Wednesday, that's a really great time to do a debrief. Well, let's talk about the components. Let's talk about the practice. Let's talk about what we discussed in class. Let's bring it all together in a big group here and discuss what was most challenging, what lingering questions you have, things like that. That's a really great time. And if a student has missed out on the at-home lesson, they're less inclined to be able to participate effectively in that on that Wednesday, which is still really important for us to kind of pull things together. We can also extend the lesson on the Wednesday. So when we have our whole group together again, we are able to maybe advance a little, kind of go a little bit further. We've practiced and we've discussed and we've presented for 2 days. We've done an at-home lesson, we've done an in-class lesson, and then we can kind of pull it a little bit further. We can, make things a little bit more sophisticated, introduce something a little more complicated. Again, that at-home piece is very much essential. So this gives you an idea of how an aspect of Google Classroom, in this case Jamboard, might be utilized in an at-home lesson. And again, it could be utilized by virtually any subject. Speaking of other subjects, I am going to kick it over to our science team, who's going to give you some more insights about how this might look at home.
All right, thanks, Ms. Gallagher and the English peeps, great job. I am going to talk a little bit about how Case and I made our plan for our in-class and at-home learning connections. So over the summer, when we knew this was coming, we definitely, as Ms. Coyle said, really had to rethink how we were going to plan out for the year. And as a teacher, it's a little crazy, school. So when it flips upside down, it took a little bit of a thought process and definitely a lot of planning on the front end to make that happen. And so what we looked at was really trying to make whatever our plan was work for either remote or hybrid in-person learning. So whatever the schedule was, we wanted our plan for both our semester, our units, and then our weeks to fit with whatever schedule we had. So go ahead to the next slide, please. And so how we did that, obviously our hub being Google Classroom, we made a Google site that links from that to make it pretty and fun and organized and consistent with how we place the material for our students. And one way we did that was taking that template for teachers that Ms. Coyle showed you earlier and turning it into a calendar for both the semester, the unit, and then the week. Again, weekly planning became the focus because we didn't have 5 days to kind of adjust and modify and, oh, we didn't get to that, we'll get to it. So we really wanted to make sure that we had a plan for the whole week versus a day-to-day operation. So by doing that, we always give them a section of the calendar and we call it the recommended weekly schedule. So here's the look at what we put up there for our students right at the top of every page that they see when they log in for the day for us. And it gives them an idea of what our plan is for both what we're doing when we are together. So again, whether we are in person or we are remote in our classes on our Google Meets, or what they should be doing when they're at home. And we've color coded ours with a couple different colors there and put the key right up there so they remember. And we consistently use the same format to make sure that students, it becomes repetitive, it becomes second nature. So in black, you can see those are the assignments that we do in class together when we are, again, remote or in person on our Google Meets or when we will be in person next week. In purple is what they'd be working on at home. So their day that they are not with us or their time when they are not with us, they'd be working on those assignments. And then in pink, it gives them an idea of what stuff is due, either at the end of that period or the end of that day. The goal, as has already been mentioned by many of my colleagues, was to make sure that the order was flexible. So regardless of if your student is a Monday, Thursday student who come into class, hybrid in person, or a Tuesday, Friday, the pairing of Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday, Friday assignments works in either way so that the student can either get pre-exposed to some material maybe or have some practice beforehand and then perform, in our case for science, a lab or some type of presentation or some practice that we'd be doing in the classroom together. The second thing that we really wanted to make sure we emphasized, as again, my colleagues have already mentioned, was the connection. There is no busy work. Everything is essential. We have trimmed, we have cut the fat, we have made things still meaningful and still our content, but we have definitely made sure that what we assign students matters not only for the course and the content and the skill, but for what we want them to walk away with at the end of the course. So that means that anything that they're working on at home really is relevant to helping them when we are in person, and vice versa. So it's a nice cyclical concept for the student and for us as teachers. Next slide, please. So looking a little bit more closely at what we do in kind of a pairing, whether it's a Monday, Tuesday, or a Thursday, Friday, the goal of all of our assignments, as you can see on the bottom right, is to be interactive when they are at home. So we don't just want them sitting and staring at something or doing some quick something. We want it to be, again, meaningful, and we want them to have some feedback. So you can see a list of some of the assignments or types of assignments that students might encounter, but they are definitely going to be doing something interactively, whether it's answering questions while they're watching something or doing maybe an interactive notebook, along with materials that they have been exposed to. Whatever the case is, the student has to be actively interacting with the material and most likely receiving some type of immediate feedback to provide them with either encouragement or assistance in making sure that they can continue with the work. So they don't just stop and say, oh, well, I don't know what I'm doing. It's providing them with that to continue on and then potentially even rework. Next slide, please. So what some of that would look like for our classes, and while I mentioned earlier that the class you were looking at is a co-taught class, I also teach a senior level class, anatomy, and I have the same kind of a format and plan for them as well. On the left-hand side, you can see kind of breakdowns in terms of organization. We like to be very clear on when items open and when they should be due and turned in and completed by the student, which is what you see on the left, both in terms of lecture watching, as well as practices, labs, activities, and things of that nature. On the right-hand side of the slide, you can see a few of those at-home activities that you might see your child doing. So the first is something called an Ed Puzzle, which is basically a video. We like to include our faces as well, just to make sure the students see us, even when they're not in person with us. And it basically provides them with information, example problems in a science class, tips, tricks, things like that. But it has questions embedded in it, so the student can provide check-ins and immediate feedback to see if they are understanding the material as they are walking through it. They could also, in the second box on the right, you could encounter Google Form practices, essentially like a worksheet or a lab that they would be doing, but they're doing it in a Google Form, again, linked through their Google Classroom. And that provides them, again, with immediate feedback as they work through it. With our practices, we like them to be able to redo, and that repetition can, again, help them with exposure to the material, equations, concepts, skills, whatever the case may be. And then lastly, on the bottom there, you see on our Google site, we like to have a section consistently at the bottom that tells them about useful links. So whether that's assistive videos and tutorials on concepts that maybe students are struggling with, they can watch those additionally during that at-home time. Or they may have some type of review or practice that's kind of gamified. So you may see your student working on what they're telling you is their homework, and it looks like they're playing a game. And they are, but they also aren't. Those things, as you can see there, like a Kahoot or a Quizlet, those are essentially tools that we have that provide vocabulary review, provides test type questions to quiz them on, and again, gives them immediate feedback on the material, but also gives them kind of that game-like experience, that interactive experience that makes it a little bit more entertaining and fun while they are working at home. So all of those tools are things that you may see your student working on, not only in a science class, but in some of the others. And one of those others is foreign language, and Ms. Marbach is going to talk a little bit about that.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ms. Laporte. Good morning again. My name is Kayla Marbach. Some of the examples I have here are coming specifically from Spanish 3, but I just want to make sure that parents are aware that the World Language Department really does share a lot of our activity ideas. So even if your student is taking French or German or Japanese, a lot of these ideas are applicable. On this slide, you can see another calendar example. which a lot of my colleagues have mentioned before. You can see the agendas, the different hyperlinks for activities. So what I'll focus on that's slightly different are the 3 links above the calendar. We really want to make sure our students who are learning another language have a ton of resources while they're at home. So a lot of the language teachers will relink the unit objectives and the course objectives there. We provide some study tips, examples, and then also some additional practice for the instant feedback like Ms. Laporte was mentioning. And then on this slide, I'll focus more kind of on the bottom right-hand side, just so you can see how all of our different lessons connect and how the activities build off one another. Our courses are very proficiency-based, so we want to make sure that whatever activities we're doing in class, we're also replicating that same experience for the at-home learning days. That way students are completing meaningful activities and they can still work on every different mode of the language. So if I start at the Monday and Tuesday in-person example, your students would likely be doing some type of warm-up, some listening activities, speaking with partners or in small groups, all at a safe distance, of course, and then even some writing activities. And then this slide, again, is specific to future tense, which our Spanish 3 students are studying. So if your students started at home, I'm going to show you what a choice board looks like with some different examples, again, of all these different modes of language. So if your students started in person, we would basically be modeling what they would do at home on the choice board. And if your students started at home with the choice board, those activities would essentially be a preview of what we would do in class the next day. And then Wednesday, we check in with our students online after each student has completed that in-class plan, the at-home plan, and we really like to use some of the Kahoots and Quizlet Lives that Ms. Laporte mentioned to get feedback on how our students are doing with learning targets. We get instant feedback, a lot of data. We're able to figure out which students are proficient and which students we need to reach out to for extra help. But the reason the choice board is so important during that at-home learning day is because when we start the next hybrid learning cycle, we typically start with sharing out whatever the students created. Sometimes we even have students peer edit. So again, those examples, you can kind of see how everything's connected. We'll go ahead and move to the next slide so you can see more examples of that choice board. Thank you. So here you can see 6 different boxes, and each box represents a different activity. So option 1 would be a listening, option 2, some verb conjugation, option 3, instant feedback with a practice quiz, 4 would be a speaking assignment, 5 would be a writing. So we have more open-ended questions, and then finally some Quizlet practice. We try to vary the proficiency-based activities here with the options for instant feedback. But what we would ask is that your students would complete 4 of these 6 activities. That way they do have some choice, which was mentioned previously in this presentation, but again, we can keep working on proficiency. Your students would get this template through Google Classroom, which was also previously mentioned. They can type their answers directly on here. They can insert links to voice recordings, or they can even insert screenshots. So very, very easy to use with our technology here at the district. And then the final slide that I'll talk about just has some more names for you with those practice quizzes that, again, do have a game feel. So you might hear some music coming from your student's computer, but we just want to make sure you know that they are questions that relate back to the learning targets and objectives. GimKit is one that we use for grammar and vocabulary. Quizlet Live is one that your students might play in teams just to get some interaction while we're online on that Wednesday. Kahoot is another practice quiz, and then finally Quiz Is. And then I know I mentioned before that we'll use this data, but it is really important to understand that teachers may use these practice quizzes for the at-home learning days, so they're self-paced. So if your students aren't completing these practice quizzes, it will eventually catch up to them because we won't be able to get a hold of them for extra help and things like that. So we can use them live, we can use them self-paced, but they're super, super helpful for communication with students and teachers. So that concludes everything I have from world language. Hopefully those examples were helpful, and I will go ahead and turn it over to guidance.
Good morning. I'm Beth Zacco, counselor at Central Campus. In guidance services, we're working to provide informative and engaging presentations and lessons for students. Our lessons are delivered through primarily our Counselor Connection. At East Campus, the dates for Counselor Connection are Tuesday, Friday in remote weeks at 11:30. At Central Campus, it's Wednesday mornings at 10 a.m. We encourage you to have your student check for emails from their school counselor. so they do not miss those presentations. As we don't see them day to day in a classroom, those emails become very important for them to receive the information from us. Slide. And we have Google Classrooms too. Every school counselor has a Google Classroom. In that Google Classroom, we also house information from our social worker. So you can see some wellness and support resources listed there and contact information. Our contact information is housed in our Google Classrooms, very important resources that students can access. And lessons, our videos from lessons that we've presented are also housed in our Google Classrooms. Slide. Here you can see a list of social emotional learning and academic presentations that we have or will be covering throughout the year. Right on this slide, you'll see an example of this past week at the freshman campus. We did a check-in to see how they're doing at the start of second semester and goal setting so that they can plan out what are those goals they have for their academic success throughout the semester. That goal setting also gave them an opportunity to make a copy of that sheet to save into their own Google Drive, so they have that for themselves. Next slide. This shows an example of an activity at the start of the year at the freshman campus. We did the High School 101. As you can see, this is kind of a comprehensive document. It has lots of information and hyperlinks to that information. We actually took several weeks to go through each of these categories, so we could really help students understand things about GPA and transcripts, how important their attendance was, some study skills information. All of this presentation, some advice from seniors who did Flipgrid videos to let the freshmen have some tips and pointers. All of this is we went through to help our freshmen transition to high school and into our LTHS community. And now I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Fields, who will talk about college and career.
Thank you. One of the I shouldn't say new, but one of the priority goals that our district has and the state has for students is that they leave Lockport Township High School being college and career ready. And so the guidance team has put together many different lessons to help students learn about themselves and learn about opportunities in the college and career realm. And as Ms. Zacco said, unfortunately, we don't have the luxury of having a day-to-day classroom to meet with students to provide these lessons. And so we do this now through our counselor connections. So on this slide, you'll see some of the presentations we've already done during first semester through that counselor connection time in order to provide students critical information on learning about themselves and how to plan for their future. Some of the things we've done, we did a senior post-high school planning presentation. We do presentations to help students learn how to use Naviance. And Naviance is our new college and career planning tool that we are helping students of all grades learn how to use tools such as personality inventories, interest inventories, college searches. I recently did a presentation to seniors on scholarships and how they can search for both local and national scholarships through Naviance. We've done presentations on FAFSA for our seniors. And so on the right-hand side of that information, you'll see an example slide of something that we've all posted to our Google Classrooms in terms of college and career info. And this is information that is all hyperlinked to the different presentations. On the left of that slide in the black squares are presentations that we actually did with students during Counselor Connection and took the opportunity to actually record the presentations because we understand that sometimes students during our Counselor Connection time may be meeting with an academic teacher for additional help. And so we don't want students to miss the information. We actually record the presentations and post it to our Google Classrooms in addition to all of the information that's hyperlinked here. On the bottom left is just some more information, again, regarding Naviance and how we are helping students learn how to use that as a tool in terms of college and career planning. One example of that is what's on the bottom right under What's New. We're actually hosting college representative visits virtually due to our distancing and due to the restrictions caused by the pandemic, but we want students to be able to get information from those college reps. And so students can actually sign up through Naviance to do a rep visit. And so here's some information. If a student's interested in meeting with the rep from McKendree University, they're visiting the school on March 4th. And so the student would click that more info link to follow the steps to sign up for that rep visit. As we move into second semester, we will continue to provide these lessons through our Counselor Connection time in college and career planning. Again, we are going to be recording those. And so when we post to our Google Classroom, we not only post the recording of the presentation, but we'll post the slides independently because we want students to be able to access all of those hyperlinks to the information that we have provided. All right, I'm going to turn it back over to Ms. Cristofaro for the remainder of the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much to our teachers and counselors for giving such spectacular presentations that were so well planned. It's truly appreciated, and for really highlighting the role of intended learning targets, the interactive experiences students are having, the feedback they're getting, and the tools you're using to make this a rich experience for students. To anybody who's watching out there, thanks for listening. They were merely painting some broad strokes of what is happening across our classrooms. Of course, there's never any substitute if you have specific questions for contacting your student's teacher directly or their counselor for the best answers. And with that, we'll come back to if there are any questions appear in the chat, you can put them there now. I was trying to glance at our YouTube channel and there didn't appear any yet. So I'm going to go with some of the questions that emerged through the thought exchange. And so the first question I'd like to put out there to our team is, how are you using videos during this time to support student learning? And I think Ms. Weisserach, because she talked about her use of video, I'll start with her.
Sure. As Mrs. Gallagher and probably some of the other teachers mentioned, our in-person minutes, of course, are really limited. And so we choose what, we're going to experience with our students in person really carefully. And so sometimes there are, still times that we want to make sure our students can see our faces when they are at home, or just other reasons that we may want to share a video with them. And it can definitely vary. In my class, for example, sometimes I'll make videos for students that are optional. I may say, you can either watch this video of me presenting these directions, or you can read the text copy, just based on students' learning preferences, if they'd rather listen to something or if they'd rather read something. Sometimes I'll give a video that is reviewing content that, again, is maybe optional, that I'll say, before the quiz tomorrow, if you want to, watch this review, please do so. But then other times it will be me modeling an assignment that I'll want them to see, and I'll require them to watch a video. Maybe they'll have to post a comment to it. So we're choosing really carefully when we're asking students to sort of view us when they're not in school. But it certainly wouldn't be something where, it's watch this 45-minute lecture that you would have if you were in person. We try and make our videos sort of like 10 minutes or fewer. The running joke in the English department is my videos will always be 12 minutes, no matter how hard I try to make them shorter. But they are really focused, really intentional to connect with students, to give them opportunities to either review or to see our faces or to get a little bit of modeling and content when they're at home.
I was just going to add to that. Absolutely. Sometimes we say video in general, sometimes, and sometimes this is true, we might use a video that's from YouTube about a particular topic that is an educational type video. But a lot of the videos that we are talking about, as Ms. Wierciak mentioned, are, our teaching, our connection with students, where our faces are present, which again, research indicates students are maybe more likely to engage with their teacher when they are presenting things via video. And I have used this strategy for things that are in English. I mentioned I teach seniors that are maybe a little bit more complex. So I will go over something in class, and I know sometimes there might be, as students dig into something, they might have questions that arise once they get into that process. And then I can make a video that anticipates those questions. And I can say like, okay, so you're struggling with your topic, ask yourself this set of questions. Can you answer affirmatively to these questions? Then your topic is you're probably good and you can feel confident about that. So I can head off some issues. And then when they email me, I can say, yes, I can answer a specific question. I can say, also watch me because I've kind of anticipated this. And you can rewatch then as well. It's a great opportunity to go back and revisit something. It's there, it's on the website. And I've seen that because we can see as we post our videos how many times they've been viewed. So sometimes when you get more views than students, you know that they have gone back to kind of rewatch and relearn. And that's kind of a gratifying thing and a really good resource for us.
Thanks for answering that question. Another question that emerged was about bringing students in maybe more frequently, especially when they're in a class that requires some hands-on programming like our automotive classes or some capstone classes like AP Chem or AP Bio. So Dr. Webb-Ray, I don't know if you want to tackle that question.
Sure. So first semester, we worked with teachers and families to do just that, to bring students into the building so they could have those hands-on experiences that not only allowed students to demonstrate their learning and get some help in reaching their learning targets, but teachers the opportunity to assess their learning. And we want to continue doing that second semester. So bringing in students where they need the opportunity to have some hands-on activities. And also many of our special education students are coming into the building regularly to get that more intensive instruction from their teachers. So we're very strategic in how we do this so that we can support the health and safety of all of our students, but we also want to provide those opportunities where we can for classes where that particular hands-on experience can be a significant part of the learning.
Thanks, Dr. Webb-Ray. Another question that emerged as part of the thought exchange is, how are you building relationships with students, both in remote, but also more importantly, because we just changed semesters and so many students changed teachers, in the hybrid world?
First, I just want to start by saying we really, really miss your students. And I think students and teachers alike are missing that interaction. So we're very much looking forward to seeing your students next Thursday and Friday. But online, a lot of us have had some creative tools that we've been able to use to get personal inventories on your students. I know a lot of teachers are using things like Google Form or even Pear Deck, which allows students to sign in and out with how they're feeling that day. And we've tried other little things too to build our community for our classrooms, just by celebrating birthdays, giving shout outs on the Google Meets or even an email. And then groups that we know are competing, sports, activities, we'll mention those things as well. But as a language teacher, I feel very fortunate. I'm able to get a lot of insight on your students' extracurricular activities and hobbies just through their speaking and writing assignments. So I'm able to ask them some good follow-up questions there just to build those relationships. But naturally, those side conversations would happen at school during the passing period. So if your student signs on just a couple minutes early to the Google Meet or stays after, we're kind of able to replicate that experience as well. Because again, we do really miss that interaction with your kids, and we're looking forward to seeing them Thursday and Friday.
Ms. Fields?
So one of the fortunate opportunities I have as a counselor at East is I have 3 years to work with students. to build that relationship. But obviously in the setting that we're in, I don't get that opportunity necessarily face to face. So students have been great with emailing me questions and concerns. And sometimes it's not a situation where I feel like I could really respond effectively in an email back to the student. And so with the opportunity of these Google meetings, I have sent students links to say, hey, jump on this Google meeting with me and let's have that conversation. And at least I hopefully give the sense of being a little bit more face-to-face as I would if the student were in my office. We also have an opportunity for students to talk with counselors even during kitchen table from 3 to 4. Mrs. Teresi and myself are the counselors on duty Monday through Thursday, which also does work through that Google meeting, and students can jump on and be face-to-face with a counselor to ask those very personal, sometimes, questions. So we look forward to continuing using the technology we have available to build these relationships that we have with students.
Ms. Zacco?
I agree wholeheartedly with what Ms. Fields was saying. And I have to say, I love my counselor connection time every Wednesday at 10 a.m. This has actually been a fabulous opportunity. I've gotten to know these freshmen so well through the counselor connection because they're tuning in. We have a good following of students who are tuning in every Wednesday. This is something in person we don't necessarily have that interaction weekly with students. So it's been wonderful. So I just encourage you to have your students join those counselor connection meetings.
Thanks. Another question that emerged as part of the thought exchange is, and many of you referenced this, like the challenge to reorganizing yourself to what school would be during these times. And certainly students have had challenges with organizing and prioritizing, all those things that go under self-management. Can you talk about how you've helped students adjust to that?
Sure, I'll jump in here. I think one of the things that we all have mentioned, and I'm sure would mention, is consistency. You know, we've tried to set up our Google Classrooms or sites or whatever we have available to the students in the most consistent way where formatting is the same and access is the same, so that links and due dates and how assignments are turned in is consistent. And I think when we do that, it makes it definitely more helpful for the student to be able to do that. We like to present things and tools that students can use. So we have links to things like online planners or Google Keeps, again, something linked into their Google platform that can help them. It's like a virtual Post-it site embedded in their Google profile. And then I usually hold up like my daily planner that's old school that I got from Target that they see. So they know that we're doing some of those same tools and we're presenting them to them as well to encourage that. I know myself and my co-teacher, Ms. Case, we oftentimes encourage students to meet with us. She's designed, an online kind of homework keeper that students can kind of type in their stuff and check it off when it's done. So it's very satisfying, and did an instructional video for that as well. So I think our consistency and sharing with them the tips and tricks that we have has been beneficial. And then noting those students who are on the struggle bus and kind of calling them over to meet with us in that 1 to 3 time in the afternoon to kind of help them get on board during this experience.
Yeah, and several of the senior teachers, when our kids for English, they changed teachers that semester. And so we have a new bunch of students that started with us in January. And, we pulled them and asked them, what is something that you learned about yourself last semester? And so many of them said, I learned that I have to get organized. I have to figure this out. And so it has really been a good life lesson for them. And something that I talk with my students about is that, with everything still being pretty shut down, we don't have all these extracurricular activities. We almost have too much time on our hands. And so the kids will say, well, I feel like I have this whole day in front of me, so I just put it off. I just keep telling myself, I'll do it later, I'll do it later, I'll do it later, and then I don't get it done. And so I think it goes back to what Dr. Webb-Ray said at the beginning, that if they follow along on their at-home day, follow your regular schedule. I keep reminding my students to follow their regular schedule. And the other thing is, we're teachers, we're very compassionate people. And I acknowledge with my students that it is really hard for them. They have 5 teachers. They have to get used to 5 different people's routines. And I tell them constantly, ask me questions. If I give you, here's what to do, you've got your calendar, it's in Google Classroom, I've put it on my screen for a presentation. If you were overwhelmed and you were overloaded after sitting on 3 hours of Google Meets for the day, ask us questions. You can always send us an email. Most of us use Remind. You can send us a text via Remind. We will always do whatever we can to help our students. I tell my students too, if you need that designated homework time, we have the kitchen table, but if you just want to be on a meet with me sometime between 1 and 3 and they're working on the meet and I'm getting grading done or I'm in another meeting with planning going on, it's just a time to kind of keep them, on point, that this is what I'm supposed to be doing during this time. See, teachers are the ultimate multitaskers. But again, just encourage your students to ask questions. Come, see us on the meets, stay after for those few minutes like Ms. Laporte mentioned. That can make a big difference. Come on early.
There is just one more question I want to throw out there. I know it's 11 o'clock, so let's just maybe have 1 or 2 people in less than 90 seconds answer this one, because this was a new one that came up in the thought exchange. When we go to hybrid, how do you help students who are absent? I'm calling Ms. Gallagher.
Yes, absolutely. Well, anytime a student is absent, this whole presentation has been about the virtues of Google Classroom, and we hope that is the first place they kind of go. But the truth is, we are so available, as Ms. Coyle said. We often reach out to students. I just reached out to a student yesterday one who was absent and one who transferred into my class, and so I arranged an afternoon meeting with them. That afternoon time is very, very valuable to be able to make those connections, to meet with someone one-on-one, to try to help a student whose absences might be overwhelming them, or who might need to get clarification about something, or who is using Google Classroom and still has just needs to clarify, just wants to make sure they're on the right track. So we try to kind of keep track of those students who might seem not to be, sometimes they might not be as vocal in class. They might not be as, trying to assess where they are, if they're fully getting it. That afternoon time is really valuable, but also so many avenues to contact us if they want to reach out. I used Remind for the first time last semester. I was kind of surprised at the number of students who did contact me via Remind. Even when we were working on something virtually, even in class, I would have all my stuff laid out, and sometimes they would email me during class. Sometimes they would use the chat. Sometimes they would use the Remind app during class. So there were many different ways I was checking to see if students wanted to ask me something more privately or wanted a little help or clarification. And a lot of those things are available outside of the classroom period as well. So, there's just so many kind of humanistic resources. And as Kara said, I think that the nature of the teachers is that they're very humanistic and empathetic, and they want to see everyone succeed. And so a lot of the resources, are great, but I think it's the human teacher element behind them that is the most important thing.
Thank you, Ms. Gallagher. For everybody who listened and stayed on with us the whole time, thank you so much. It cannot go unnoticed how dedicated the staff is that is here with you, but they are merely representatives of our entire staff who continue to say dedicated and very desirous of helping students. So one more time, if a question was not answered, please reach out. First best bet is your student's teacher or their counselor, but certainly you can reach out to me, Lori Cristofero, Assistant Superintendent, or Dr. Jen Webb-Ray, our Assistant Principal of Curriculum and Instruction, or any of our administrative staff. We are here to help, and we want to see students succeed during this time. Thank you. Thanks to all the educators in the room. Bye, and have a great day.